Okay, well, I think, Steve, I think we're good to go, man. Like I
Okay.
said before the podcast, I appreciate you making the effort to come into the office. It's always a lot better to actually chat in person as opposed to talking on a laptop screen. It's handy, but it's not the best mode of conversating.
Yeah. Face to face is always good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I've been following you for a little while. Did you recently start your Instagram? Like, were you not on the Instagram game for a little while there?
I'm not massively big onto social media, I think.
Uh-huh.
Too busy doing other things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a lot of friends who are quite big into it, but obviously, if you kind of want to grow and you want to get yourself out there,
Mm.
and that's kind of gone quite organically, really.
Yeah.
It started off as a personal account. I'm a qualified coach in both cycling and running, and really it was a social media account for my racing team originally, and putting it out there. So like, if I was cycling, if I was racing, performing well, it was nice to link in with the other guys, and then it's kind of gone into a business account now.
Yeah.
Um,
Because
so
I've seen
yeah,
it's grown a fair amount since. I feel like you've went from like 500 or 600 followers to like over 1,000 or something now. It shows you that like whatever you're doing is working, right?
yeah, I think working with Jake has obviously helped a massive
Mm.
amount.
Yeah, I think that's how I found you actually. I was watching his YouTube video,
Yeah,
and then he did a session with you. Was it a running session? I think you did with him, maybe at the track.
that's right.
Is that
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think that's how I found you. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's that kind of again just happened naturally.
Mm.
A friend of a friend put Jake in contact with me. A fellow coach, a Harrock's coach, actually got speaking to Jake, and Jake's obviously sponsored by Puma and High Rocks, etc., and Red Bull. I wanted to do some running drills because obviously it's a running sport. So Tommy, who's his videographer, said, "Oh, I know someone."
Yeah.
And then gave me a call and said, "Yeah, come down to the track and we'll do some drills." But told me about the project he was particularly looking at, which was Project 230. And it was kind of like, right, okay, running drills are not just going to get you to that time,
Mm.
because obviously, we're not talking about this level of performance, we're talking about this level of performance. So I had a few thoughts around how he could get there. And obviously, he's a super fit guy. And from that point, it's just kind of snowballed, really. The amount of people contacting me, and it's been great, really, and fantastic for Jake because he's a very humble guy, but he's super fit and he's super passionate. So he looks at lots and lots of different things, and ticks all the boxes.
Yeah, I love watching his video about the 230 where he was saying like so many people were doubting his ability to do it.
Yeah,
It must have just and obviously you don't just do those things just to prove others wrong, clearly. But man, it must have just been so like gratifying for him in a way to actually achieve that goal. What is it like for you working with an athlete that's like you say at that elite level? They're not just trying to run a marathon, that's an achievement in itself, but to run it sub 230. What is it like working with athletes at that level?
I mean, it's inspiring in itself because as a coach, you're learning all the time. You're learning about individuals, their kind of psyche, how they operate. And it is about getting into the mind of someone else, finding out how they work. And like I say, Jake is super thorough in what he does. And obviously, he's got numerous levels of support now with Red Bull. There's not many
Mm,
people who are sponsored by Red Bull. That
so
is
prestigious.
that is a massive, massive thing.
Yeah.
But I think prior to that, he has that thought process where they are ticking all the kind of boxes, all the kind of marginal gains things, looking into how can I make myself a little bit better all the time. Um, so then naturally you feed off that and you think, well, actually, come on, let's see where we can go. Where can we take this further? And sometimes it's very, very simple things. For Jake, for example, we talked about drafting, for example, and it's amazing how many very, very decent runners don't employ that, because if we're cycling, we can generally feel the wind, we can feel the air resistance. Whereas running, we don't necessarily think about it, but running behind someone or in that draft makes quite a considerable difference. So
Yeah.
it's like two ways to look at it. If you're running behind someone, do you want to go faster or do you want to make it easier on yourself? So I think that is the thing. Working with high performance people, they are very in tune with themselves, and if they're constantly self reflecting And that generally means the reason why they're in the position where they are, because they've been doing that throughout their athletic performance over the years.
Yeah. Maybe from like more of a high level, when it comes to training elite level people, how
Mm.
do you take someone who's already elite to being even better? I feel like when you're starting out running and you run it, I don't know, 6 minute Ks or something, like getting from a 6 minute K to maybe a 5 minute K in 6 months or 12 months might be achievable. But if you're running or cycling at a really fast pace already, how do you take someone from already being fast to even being even faster?
Okay, good question.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, I think the processes are all the same. Whether you're a beginner athlete, to an advanced level athlete, and um, especially at the elite level, we might have different support networks. So, for example, a professional cycling team, professional cyclist, Tour de France. Chances are they're going to have a nutritionist, they're going to have a sports scientist, physiologist, physio, coaching. They're going to have all that backing, so they're going to have all these things in place. Whereas someone who might be an elite level badminton player, or high rocks, sort of
Yeah,
like emergent sport,
yeah, yeah.
they might not, they might not have all that. So I would look at an athlete as like an avatar in a computer game. So in my day, it was Street Fighter, Chun
Yeah.
Li, whatever. Now it's Call of Duty
Yeah.
or Fortnite, or
Yeah, yeah.
so if we look at that health bar, that 100%, okay, and we won't use health, even though health is a very, very important marker for athletes. So if we use that as a performance bar, what does that 100% performance look like? Okay, so we think, right, okay, well, 100% performance. So let's go down to the raw thing. So fitness wise, how fit are we? Okay, in relation to our sports, if we're looking at cycling, okay, what's our functional threshold? How long can we hold a certain power for? Um, if we are a sprinter, what's our maximum torque or sustained power over 10 seconds, 30 seconds? Creating a power profile, and this is similarly with running and other endurance sports. So it might be things like what's our lactate threshold, what's our VO2. So I think at that elite level, everything needs to be quantifiable. We need to have, right, where are we starting? Where do we need to get to? Okay, so the raw things are fitness, okay, recovery and nutrition. So these are the absolute basics. So how fit are we? We look at the kind of key things from an endurance perspective. We might look at S&C.
Mhm.
That's a big thing. I know the high rocks guys, they're
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
50% S&C. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Cyclists, they've been into it for quite a few years. Runners are probably getting a grasp of it
Yeah,
now,
yeah, yeah.
thinking, okay, maybe I should start doing some of this.
Not just run all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so one of the adages goes, a stronger athlete is a better athlete. Okay, now, so again, whether you're running, whether you're a table tennis player,
Yeah.
all right, maybe not darts,
Yeah.
not the fine skill stuff, but
Yeah.
if it's got some level of athletic
Yeah.
performance, then a stronger athlete is generally better. So, again, that can be quantifiable. How much can you lift? How much can you jump? How much power do you have when you're throwing? Um, there are elements too of prehabilitation, because we've got to be thinking about, all right, we're going to get injured at some point. How do we manage injury, illness, mechanical imbalances? Um, and then we've got mobility and flexibility. How mobile are we? How flexible are we? Again, a more mobile, within reason athlete is going to be a better athlete. Someone who's more flexible, going to be less injury prone. So, just from a pure fitness perspective and training perspective, are we ticking all those boxes? If we self-scored ourselves, and this is what I'd say to a lot of athletes, if we, again, looking at 100%, if we scored ourselves at a 10 on each one of those, are we a 7? Are we a 10? Okay, well, we're 10, let's maintain it. Or are we a 5? So what can we do about it? So that's just purely fitness. We might look at other things. So the fitness element of the training is creating the adaptation. So it's forcing adaptation in our body. So then we need to be thinking about, okay, so recovery. A raw thing for recovery is sleep. How
Yeah.
well do we sleep? So problems with mobile phones, 10 o'clock at night, whatever, 12 o'clock,
Yeah.
that's interfering with sleep patterns. Do we have sleep processes? are we eating correctly for sleep? So things like, having tryptophan or, kiwis, I believe, are supposedly very good for sleeping.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah,
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 vitamin C supposedly. I
yeah.
think that's the
Ah,
thing.
okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so, if we can assess our sleep, we've got things like Whoop and Garmin's that, it gives us our REM, etc. Um, so again, self score on that, because if we're not sleeping well, we're not recovering. Um, Sports nutrition on a daily basis. I mean, go back 20 years, you'd have to go to a specialist nutritionist or dietitian to assess your diet. What are your macros like, what are your minerals. Well, nowadays it's all on
So,
iPhone,
My
isn't it?
Fitness Pal or whatever. Yep, yeah. It's like a scan the barcode.
How easy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we can assess all that, and that is the big thing. All right, macros are important, but I think your micronutrients and your vitamins, that is one of the key things. So again, if we start looking at all those, the key things there, the fitness element, if we're looking at the nutrition and the sleep, those are the raw fundamentals. If we are off, if we are 7 out of 10, how do we make it 8 out of 10, or we might even be lower than that? Someone might be an insomniac, or they might be training so much that they can't sleep, so then they're not recovering. And what we're looking at athletes is how much can we train, and how quickly can we recover
Yeah,
to do it again.
yeah.
And it's just, and that is the process. Um, so, well, we've not even touched on technical ability,
No.
So you
You
look
could
at,
be talking about any sport right now.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
all these, and I'm a multi-sport coach. I've coached different sports. So that is the way we'd look at things, So like a skills assessment, technical assessment. Big things with cycling is the level of technicality that you need to succeed at the pro level.
What would technicality look like for? I don't know much about cycling. So when it comes to like cycling technicality, what are the underlying ideas there?
Okay, so generally, the best cyclist in the world, because a lot of people think, oh, right, well, it's just the fastest guy or the guy with the biggest power output. And it's not. It's numerous different things, but, so like dynamicism.
Yeah.
Um, but that technical aspect, generally, the best riders in the world are the most technically gifted. And that's not to, dismiss any of the other pro cyclists are going to be phenomenal bike handlers. But the Wout van Aerts, the Van der Powers, the Pidcocks, and these have come from the cyclocross scene, which are, is a little bit like mountain biking, so their bike handler would be phenomenal. They are top tier because of that, so that technical aspect allows them to do things and ride sensibly, that will put themselves in advantageous positions, basically.
So is it like their ability to handle the bike, basically?
The bike, yeah,
Yeah,
at speed.
yeah.
So, and I think that is one of the key things. It's at speed. Cornering is done in a certain way, and pretty much with all size riders, the technical aspect is the same. A good friend of mine who went from it was a GB rider actually. It was very handy anyway, but
Yeah.
he managed to get a pro tour contract later on in his career. In fact, I don't know how old Matt was at the time. Matt Holmes, he's a very good guy though, local lad. And when he stepped up to pro tour level, so basically like the Premier League of cycling, like the top 20 teams. I remember him saying to me, he said the big difference was the descending at speed. And
Is it like risk management, would you say? Or is it actually how to do it
both.
safely? Yeah.
Both. I mean, the thing is, even at low level cycling, so your Cat 4 riders, one of the acceptances, and it's acceptance of risk, because of any sport, but cycling in particular, you're going to crash. Okay, you're going to crash and you're going to hurt yourself, and it's like you've got to accept that. And the faster you're going, the risks are higher. And these guys are going to be descending 50 mile an hour, 60 mile an hour, 70 mile an hour, and there might be 6 or 7 people across. And if you've ever descended at 30 mile an hour in shorts and a t-shirt,
Exactly. You're not in leathers like you are on a motorbike or something like that. You got a helmet and some lycra on. It's not going to protect you very well.
yeah, exactly. So and that is an acceptance of risk. So I think that is the big thing with the Pro Tour level. The step up is the psychological aspect. And as the speeds go up, as you are put under more pressure, as you are at the edge of physical kind of fitness, your lucidity in your mind starts not operating, and therefore your technicality stops operating. So things happen very, very quickly. You know, when you feel comfortable and everything's kind of lucid, you can kind of see things. Whereas if you're on the edge of physical failure, then you can't see what's happening. And sometimes that'll happen in front of you, and you can't do anything about it. You
Yeah,
know,
it's
uh,
just bad luck.
it's just that's the way it is. Yeah,
Yeah,
you accept that risk.
yeah, yeah. I remember chatting to Hayden Wild on the podcast. He's from Whakatane as well. I'm mates with him, but he was saying that there's such a big element of risk, like with the cycling in particular.
Yeah,
He said like you can train so hard for triathlon, but then there's still elements that are completely out of your control. If someone has an incident right in front of you and you don't have time to swerve around them, well, that's just kind of bad luck. But you got to put yourself in the best position possible to perform the best that you can at those events.
yeah, yeah. He's and that comes from racing. Is being positionally aware. You
Mm,
know, so
mm.
sometimes you get a bit of a sixth sense. You think something's not right here, or if you're in a bunch of riders, and I'm sure this happens in the pro peloton, there'll be certain riders that go, don't ride behind him. He's known to fall off, or he makes
Yeah,
bad decisions, or follow this guy because
he knows what he's doing.
he knows what he's doing. And they all know what they're doing,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
some people might be better than others. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And with your time with GB cycling, I don't know too much about like what your role looked like and exactly what you were doing then. So could we dive into that a little bit and you sort of explore what that looked like for you?
Right. Okay. I'll get some clarity. So I didn't work with GB cycling.
Hmm.
Okay. So that's just for clarity.
Yeah.
I've raced 4GB
I see. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
under an age group level,
Yeah.
but not. I'm a British cycling coach, but not been coaching
Okay.
under GB.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So with your British cycling coaching, then what does that look like and what does your experience look like there?
Um, I mean, that's very much kind of at a club level. I'm working with individuals, and yeah, I mean, it covers lots of different things. It really depends what people want out of it. I think from a British cycling perspective, people wanting to race that is what people are wanting to do. They're looking for that performance pathway to get better. Um, and I'm predominantly road and a little bit of time trial, but roads the kind of key thing. So it's it's not so much about fitness because nowadays we can generate the fitness through things like Zwift and which is great. You know, Zwift's fantastic and turbo trainers, and you know having the likes of Zwift means we can really engage, and you know we get into this.
Gamifies it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
does, and
yeah.
it's brilliant. You know, rather than just sitting there going, right, I just need to turn over at 100 RPM for
Yeah.
however many minutes. Um, so I've found the majority of it now is again it boils down to the technical skills. So especially in the local races, and it's probably similar in different countries that people are gaining and massive amounts of fitness on Zwift, and then they're suddenly entered into a race,
Yeah.
in a bunch race, and and it goes to this three-way thing. They've got the power to get there, but they don't have the technical skills to be in that position, and they don't have the lucidity then to be in that position. And suddenly you're surrounded by 60 other people.
That would be scary, man. Not having any of experience, like say, with being with 5 people or 10 people, to being in a massive bunch.
Yeah,
Like the element of risk there is massive. If handlebars touch other handlebars, like that could be everyone going down.
yeah, yeah. So you've got to train within that scenario. You've got to rub shoulders, as they call it. If you go back 20 years, the way the clubs would be, if you're interested in cycling, you'd find out someone that go, oh yeah, come down to a local cycling club, because we didn't have things like Zwift and all that kind of business. It'd be like, you've got a bike, get out and ride it.
Yeah, yeah.
So you'd go out and join the local club. They'd go on your training rides. You might do a chain gang. So then all the way through this process, it'd be like, okay, right, you need to do this. So you'd get your elders, or coaches who tell you this is what you need to do in this situation. So it'd be a learning process, and you go out every weekend, you form a bond with that group, and you learn how to protect your front wheel, and not to put other people in danger, but also to look after yourself. So you learn all these kind of skills, and it builds over time. Whereas I think now there's a thought process. All right, I can go and get the relevant fitness on Zwift and doing all that kind of stuff, which is not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. But then maybe go and do a little bit of bike riding, or do a little bit of informal bike riding with your friends, and then something. Oh, go and enter a race. It's like, right, okay, you need to think about this before you do that, because you're not only putting yourself at risk, you're potentially putting others at risk as well.
Yeah. It's almost like being in a driving simulator or something and then entering like a car race. And like you might be really good at taking the corners and all that stuff in the simulator, but as soon as you hop into an actual car, the feeling and everything of it is so different. I could imagine even like the difference with actually being on the road versus like being on Zwift. Like when you're on Zwift, you're not looking out for, I don't know, potholes or slick paint or like things that are on the road that could be hazardous.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I could see how it's very beneficial for the fitness element of it, but you keep coming back to the technicality of it. Like,
Yeah.
there's no crossover there.
Yeah, zero crossover.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah. And I think the people who are going to be using Zwift will be going out on the road as well. But
yeah,
there's got to be that go between going riding out and doing a social ride, between being competing. So I know with the track guys, they have like a track accreditation. You can't just rock up and race at a track.
yeah,
You've got to go through basically like your driving license before you can race. And track racing is highly dangerous, and you need a massive amount of skill level, really. It's no different from road racing in that respect. But again, I think there just needs to be proper protocols to go through. So I do find a lot of people will come to me for that. I'm interested in racing. What should I do?
yeah. What does that process look like? Say if people come to you and they say, like, I'm interested in racing, I'm keen to race, what do you have a standardized process on how you approach that? Like, what does that journey for that person look like from there once they approach you?
It's very individual. Okay, so a lot of it's initial consultation and finding out what they've done, and what they're doing. Going into a skills assessment then. So it'd be the case of, well, let's get out, and we always start off small when we're coaching. And this is be the same, we're coaching football or doing running or doing cycling. Do your skills small first. So it could be something very, very simple, like a little loop with some chicanes, and then a bit of stop and start, and then some sprinting. And then, like, okay, so we can judge within a very small space of area. Can someone go through a slalom nice and quick?
Yeah,
Can they stop? Can they balance the bike? Have they got a decent cadence? Um, so just some of the raw things, where braking skills, etc. And then once that we kind of master that small, then we make it bigger, we make it faster. Um, so that's the kind of like very much raw element of the technical skills. Then you've got the where you're riding in groups. Obviously, if you're riding in groups, there's a greater increase of crashing. But
yeah.
that's where the confidence comes in.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
definitely.
it's not just going around a corner; it's going around a corner with someone on your inside and someone on your outside. And it's still mesmerizing to watch, isn't it? That you watch things like the Tour de France and everyone's snaking in and snaking out.
Yeah.
But guaranteed, if you're in that group and you're doing that regularly, it just feels like the most natural thing in the world. It feels like a wave.
Fluid or something. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So it will generally be a skills assessment. People are coming in and assessing where they want to go, really. But there's lots of opportunity now for people coming into the sport, different levels. So British Cycling has, a categorized system, and generally people are coming at fourth cat racing. They have like go ride, um, training and opportunities for people to get out there if they can't access normal clubs or normal training. Um, so there's lots of opportunity within British Cycling. Um, and yeah, then you've got other organisations like TLI, which is the League International, which is catered more for veteran racers. So people who might be in the 30s or in the 40s and the 50s. And you find this with a lot. I'm particularly with a club at the moment called Hoppers Rollers, and they are from Preston Grasshoppers, which are a rugby team.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, yeah. So all kind of ex, professional. I'm pretty sure they're professional rugby players,
Yeah.
but they're all damaged, broken, cauliflower ears,
Yeah.
etc.
All got something going on. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're used to hurting themselves.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So then, they've had a period of sport in their lives, competitive sport, and then they're wanting to try other things, So then they're wanting to go into bike racing. It's like, okay, so where do we go from here? Um,
What does the psychological element of competing and improving look like? Because one thing you're saying, which is really interesting that I didn't consider about cycling, is how technically proficient you have to be. Maybe that's because I've just been getting into running more lately, and that's like, yeah, you could improve your running form, but it's not that technical. Like taking a turn and stopping when you're running is pretty straightforward, not like on a bike. But so there's that physical element of it. What does the psychological element look like for an athlete who, like yourself or like someone that you train, who's wanting to improve?
um, I think it goes into different areas, So I think there's the psychology competition, um, and the psychology training, and acceptance of good days and bad days. I'm a true believer in like the rule of thirds, and with regards to your training. So um, if we had 3 workouts in the space of a week, so running, for example, we're doing 10 lots of 800. And this is probably going back to our 100%, not performance thing, but 100% health, or ready to execute a performance. So if we were at 100% and we were aiming for 10 lots of 800s, a third of the time we would, go better. We would go faster. We would feel great. We would be like, wow, that was an amazing workout. Well, whether you're doing it in the gym or going for a bike ride or whatever, we would get that third of the time. Third of the time, so like say a Wednesday, you might come in and it'd be like, yeah, it went okay. That I did all right, and I was happy with it. I completed those things. And then the other third of the time would be, that was a shocker.
Yep.
I'm giving up this sport, etc., etc. So I think as an athlete, we have to accept that we're not always going to be achieving, we're not always going to be performing in those particular things. So it's the acceptance of, we're going to do a bad one. That's okay. Let's roll on. It's the continuity of it, and the week in, week outness of it. So I think that's a big acceptance from a psychological perspective. If we've got our programming right, the rule of thirds should apply. If we're coming in and every time it's feeling too easy, it's not stressful enough.
Yep.
And if every time we're coming in we're destroyed and we can't achieve it, we're overreaching. So that's a key thing from a balance perspective. But a thing that I try to get all my athletes to focus in on: a rule of thirds. Don't worry, you're gonna have a stinker. Don't worry about it. You can have a great day. Guaranteed the next day they'll have a good day. So that's a big psychological thing to accept.
I could imagine that being quite a misconception, especially maybe for people that don't have enough data yet to know that that's going to be the case, that they have a bad session and they're like, oh no, this whole running thing or whatever it is isn't for me. I could imagine it getting people down quite a lot or completely deterring them from the sport. But I assume once you've built up that data, you've done it enough times, you start to know that it was a bad session, but it doesn't mean I should give up on the thing. And I suppose maybe the piece of motivation is probably in there too. I feel like motivation, and it's obviously way more for beginners. Like when you're elite, you don't need any motivation to do the thing, but people maybe assume that because they see others always running, they run 5 days a week, they must always be motivated to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely not the case, I don't think, for anyone. Right? When your alarm goes off at 5, I don't think many people are jumping out of bed to go for their run, maybe one in 5. So would you say that that's the case, that when you don't have the data to support that, it could be quite discouraging for you in those hard sessions?
I think the biggest thing that people should do is reflect.
Yeah.
And I think this is indicative of any performance environment. So whatever you're doing, you reflect on it. And, so for example, you do a race, and I had a client yesterday who was doing high rocks actually.
Oh, nice.
Um, Felt really, really good. Raced it well, did all the stations well, but came out of it, didn't necessarily get the time that they wanted, and was disappointed with that. And it's kind of, well, actually reflect on it, look back. Okay, so time's irrelevant, because different things can affect time. But if you reflect on it, what went right? So let's go through the things that went right. Okay, so you raced it well, paced it well, did your stations well, etc. So as long as we can get rid of the emotions sometimes and actually look back and think, well, actually, out of probably the four things that I was wanting to do, three of the things that went right, well, that's really good. Let's accept what didn't go to plan,
Yeah.
and let's work on that. Because sometimes we do get lost in it. We do get lost in especially where programming is concerned. 6 weeks into programming, you're like, why am I doing this? And you question it. But then if you look back and you reflect on every session, you can sort of like say, well, this has been part of the journey. And if I look back in 6 weeks ago, I couldn't run 5K continuously, whereas now I'm running 5K. And I felt terrible then. Now, like, my motivation is quite high, So that self-scoring thing is quite important,
It's
really.
the power of data too, right? If you're not measuring anything, I think there's like two sides to data. Sometimes measuring stuff can show that you're doing bad at the thing, which is still useful. But then also the flip side, it can actually show you that you're doing really well at the thing too. But if you're not measuring it at all, you don't know if you're getting stronger or faster or better in whatever aspect of it. Is that where you see like the power of data as being such a useful tool?
It's good sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I say, it can be quite a hindrance sometimes,
Yeah.
and especially if people have been a high performer or have just experienced a setback. So, and as a masters athlete, you kind of see this because you go, well, 10 years ago I was doing this time.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, yeah, but you're 10 years older and all these other things. So, um, I think it's a good thing to know what you're capable of. I think people get a little bit hung up too much on that, um, but it's a good thing to look at. So, with a lot of my clients, we look at data retrospectively because it could be the case of, right, okay, let's go back to the 800s, go and do 5 lots of 800s as hard as you can. Okay. And again, it falls into this rule of thirds thing. You know, some of those 800s you're going to be doing at like a 230. Some of them you're going to be doing at a 2, some of them you're going to be doing at a 3. Okay. But the thing is, as long as you gave all your effort into that session,
Mm.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what these times that are telling us. Hopefully over time we're going to build all these together and taper and get your health and your performance metrics up to where you want to be, and you're going to deliver the best performance over time. But I think the big thing is, we have to ask the core reason, why are we doing this? And even as an athlete, and elite amateur athlete or something that all right, sometimes it's a financial reason why we're doing things. That's the reason why we're doing it. But that's not the reason why we got into that sport. So okay, so what's the reason why we got into that sport? Oh, well, there's fitness gains and wanting to have fun. I want to feel better. I want to feel good about myself. I want to feel like I'm achieving. Um, and I think those are the key metrics. It's not necessarily how fast you go. And you know, we could go and run a really, really fantastic 5K, a personal best. But let's look back for the past 8 months. If your journey to that fast, you could PB, you could get a national medal,
Mm.
but you might not feel as good if that journey's not as been as good. If that kind of makes
Yeah,
sense.
absolutely.
So I think you've got to constantly reflect on the touchy feely stuff as well. How do you feel? Are you still enjoying your sport? Yeah, I still enjoy it. I still, all right, that was a tough session, but I enjoy it at the end and I enjoy being within that group. So really, maybe those are the key metrics we need to look at rather than always the data-driven stuff. It helps. It helps guides people, and sometimes from a technical aspect. I've been coaching a duathlete recently in triathlete, very very competitive, but like one of the raw metrics which was cadence, and strides per minute was low, and it's actually, well, you're missing a trick here.
Yeah.
That's a really simple thing to improve, and it'll improve your performance quite dramatically.
It's like the combination of the qualitative stuff with the quantitative stuff, right? Because I suppose, like, as people, we're not robots. Like, you can't just keep saying faster, faster, more cadence, more cadence. Like, we're still people that have emotions and stuff outside of the sport as well. And I'd be interested to dive into more of the setback mindset kind of space with you, and maybe even from your personal perspective. Like, what are some of the largest setbacks you've had, and how do you approach overcoming setbacks? Do you have a set process? Do you know, are there boxes you need to tick after experiencing a setback? Like, what does that process look like for you, overcoming a setback?
I think, and this is with all competitive sport. I think you've got to accept it. Okay, so accept whenever you're taking on competitive sport. You're always going to get ill at some point, unless you're really lucky or Superman. You're always going to get injured at some point, um, or with cycling in particular, and probably other dangerous activities, you're going to crash.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think my mentality, and especially when I was cycling quite a lot, is if I got away with one crash a year, that's okay.
You're doing good.
Doing
Yeah.
good, doing good, and that's not like a serious crash. A bit of road rash, nothing broken. All right, might have broken a bike or something like that, which makes me cry more than probably it myself.
Pay for it. Yeah.
Let's look at those wheels,
Yeah.
carbon wheels.
Yeah.
That's
Too
expensive.
expensive. Yeah.
Um, so I think yes, you've got to accept that. You've got to accept that as an athlete. Those things are going to be happen. Those things are going to happen. It's inherent risk.
Mm.
Okay. So straight away, and again, it boils down to reflection. It's like, okay, what could I have done differently? Could I have done anything about it? So for example, crashing, it could be the case of my technical skills up to scratch. Have I not been looking after my bike? Is that tire a bit worn? Should I put on new tires? Or is it just a case of it's one of those racing situations? And that is one of those things. Sometimes it's just a racing situation. You might hit a twig, you might crash, etc. Injury, it might be the case of, okay, why was it an injury? Was it an overuse injury? Am I pushing myself too hard? Am I not recovering enough? And again, it could just be one of those things. It could be a trauma thing. You might fall over, bang your knee, or you might push too hard and pull a hamstring or something. So
Yeah.
that's you know, again, you have to accept that. But then the other side is illness. And it's like that creeps in, and depending where you work, I work at a university, come
Yeah.
across 90 different nationalities probably on a daily basis, and 1,000 students. So your environment, I've got a client who works in A&E, and
Oh, man.
she's like, oh, it's like
Yeah.
she's not always ill at all.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
The risk factor there. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
these are risks.
Yeah.
So and again, it boiled down to, well, could I manage that better, manage my hygiene, and I think like with the Tour de France guys, and especially professional sports people, meeting and greeting, shaking hands. How many points of contact have you got? So going back to your question, yeah. So it's an acceptance, and I think over the times that I was competitive and working towards like national masters, so I would always have an overarching goal of national masters road race championships, which would typically be sort of like August time, that kind of time, and I'd be building up to a big peak for then. And I think probably maybe out of 10 that I've entered, I've actually only been at the start line for 5 through different
Really?
accidents. Yeah.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, and you crash and you've been building up all season. You've trained from October, November, December, all the way through. Then you've got into your races, and you're super fit. And as the race season progresses, you start off the speeds maybe 25 mile an hour average. By the time you're in June, July, the 29 mile an hour, 30 mile an hour average, your fitness builds as the racing goes up. And then suddenly going from peak fitness to, right, you're injured, you've crashed, you've got a load of road rash all over your hand, your bike's smashed, you've got a bike race in 3 days.
Yeah.
What do you do about it? Well, you probably cry a bit.
Yep.
You get upset about it, but you put a plan in place, and it's like, right, okay, this goal is not going to happen. Okay, what can I do about it? Okay, how long am I going to be out for? That's a big thing. Are there other things that I can be doing whilst I'm out? Rehab. Okay, that's one thing. Yeah, so go and seek a physio. Go and get some Duoderm on to put on your road rash. Fantastic thing if you Duoderm. It's
Is
like
it like a antiseptic kind of stuff or like?
it's hydrochloride dressing.
Oh, okay. So it
Uh,
just helps heal it?
it does, but if you get a massive load of road rash on your hip
Yeah.
when you go to sleep at night, so again it
Oh,
boils down to sleep
yeah.
and recovery, sticks to the sheets.
Oh, oh
Uh,
man, that's gross. And then you're just like peeling it off again.
Peeling it off, and it's
Ouch.
but it covers it up,
Yeah.
and you barely know you've got road rash, so you can get a relatively good night's
Yeah.
sleep, So,
Yeah.
so again, you can go through all this processing of right, okay, accept it's happened, put myself through a recovery protocol, but even if I am injured, say if I've done something to my arm, can I still get on a turbo trainer? There's so many, high level cyclists who, might have broken their arm or broken fingers, but they can still get on a turbo trainer, so they can still maintain some element of fitness. So I think that's the thing. Suddenly you react, and then you've got to be proactive in what you're doing. But I don't necessarily have a set protocol as such because you never know what
Yeah.
it's going to be. If it's illness, generally you're not feeling motivated. You don't feel like you want to train. Um, Injured, something's happened. You want to train. You're probably injured because you've been training.
Yeah.
So the motivation's high. So then it's like, well, okay, what can I do in the interim? And crashes, again, that's a similar kind of thing. But you might just be too broken to you might be too broken. Your bike might be
Yeah,
too
yeah,
broken
yeah.
to carry on.
Do you think a setback is better or worse when it's more out of your control or in your control? Say you had a crash that was like virtually unavoidable versus you getting an overuse injury. Those seem like two separate sort of setback camps where it sort of happened to you, but then the other side of it is almost like it happened because of you. Do you think that has a
Mm,
different kind of impact?
um, Possibly one because you could have foreseen it.
Mm.
I think that's the thing. I think with the cycling stuff, the technical aspect is it's just an acceptance. We're all going to crash.
Yeah,
It's all about pushing limits where we're talking about cycling and technicality. And is it the ones who take a bigger risk gain more? They do up to a point
yeah,
until
there must
something
be like
happens.
a peak, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sometimes you find out your own limits,
yeah,
and it might be the case. For cycling, certain um, tires might be grippier than others. And if we're like riding in the wet, for example, like the difference between 100 psi in the rear tire and the 90 psi might be the difference between
tiny bit more
sliding off.
surface area there. Yeah,
Yeah, you slipping off or staying upright. So
yeah,
um, normally, if we're cycling, we're doing that. You feel your back end go, so it gives you a little bit of warning,
yeah.
unless you're overcooking it too much, and it'll give you
On the first one, yeah,
you're gone. So um, yeah, I think with certain things, the technical side of stuff, it's like I probably did it because I was pushing the boundaries. If someone else comes off in front of you and you come down, all right, you're probably cursing them, but you're in a bunch of 30, 60, 100 other riders, and there is this unwritten agreement. I'm putting trust in you, and I'm putting trust in you, and we're all putting trust in each other. This is a dangerous
I
sport.
feel like that's the scary part of it because you can't like you just have to commit when you're in a bunch like that. Like I've never cycled in a bunch. I've done a bit of mountain bike racing and stuff like I was telling you before we started, but when I watch those events, one of the main things I think about is like, wow, these people are putting so much trust in the people in front of them, beside them, even behind them, to not make a mistake.
Yeah,
I guess what do you just have to kind of like let it go, I suppose, and just
yeah. It's how would kind of describe it? If you've ever ridden a motorbike or anything like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Not much, but yeah.
Okay, so like I think the first time you're on a motorbike and you're riding at say 30 miles an hour, it feels like wow, this is fast. Motorbikes and push bikes are different. They're a much bigger thing. Suddenly you go to 50 mile an hour and you think, wow, this is
I'm
scary.
flying. Yeah.
This is scary. And then you're on a motorway and you're doing 70 mile an hour. You're like, you can't do 70 mile an hour to begin with because it's just like, this is scaring me silly. Okay. Over time, okay, we get desensitized to it. Okay, you can do 50, you can do 60, you can do 70, and then it feels normal. But if we regress to again where we were 6 months prior to that, we're like, okay, I couldn't do that. I can do that now. So again, it's that building into that. You do become desensitized to it, but as it gets faster, again, your decision making skills have to be quicker and quicker. So there's a lot of time, you watch the Tour de France, they're all there, they're all in the bunch, chatting, having food together. But when the race is on, it's completely different matter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I could. I suppose I could do it. Road cycling has just never like pulled me in as much as the mountain biking did. Growing up, my sister was a road cyclist and I was always a mountain biker and would always have like a healthy rivalry with it. She would cycle 160 Ks and then I would cycle like 30 Ks on the mountain bike. I'm like, it was so much harder on the mountain bike than on the road bike. She's like, no, I did like 4 times the distance. But yeah, it's quite funny. I would like to explore a bit of your running expertise as well. And I thought what would be an interesting way of framing it is how does improvement in cycling differ to improving in running? Like they're obviously very different sport, but I guess the fundamental that joins them both is the cardiovascular element.
Hmm.
But one thing you've already been drilling into a lot, which I didn't think about, was a technical aspect of actually being able to handle the bike. So
Hmm.
when it comes to improving in running versus cycling, what are some of the big differentiators, but also some of the similarities that you see between them?
Yeah, like you say, I think the big thing is the aerobic element, and even if you take sprint running and sprint cycling and marathon running and like a Tour de France stage kind of thing, aerobically and the way you would train would probably be relatively similar. It's power over time.
Yeah.
Okay, so a sprint cyclist would be aiming, and we're not talking about Tour de France sprint cyclists, we're probably talking more about track cyclists. It's like how much power can you sustain over a certain time frame? 100 meters runner, how much power can you sustain over a certain time frame? And similar to a time trialist who might be doing a 20-minute time trial to someone who's doing a 10K runner. So the kind of power elements would probably be similar, and the training protocols again would probably be similar. Would be some longer stuff, some aerobic work, some interval based kind of work, and some tempo where we're working in and around kind of lactate threshold areas. So there's a lot of similarities with that. Um, there's probably a lot of similarities too with the amount of load we can take, and I was discussing this earlier about sort of like elite level athletes. One of the things that they're doing is probably different to amateurs is the amount of load that they can take and how much load they can take. Well, you can still probably only do so many intense sessions a week. So what does the remainder become? Well, it becomes all your zone two work and your lower end work. Um, I think in a very very basic nutshell, I think cycling is more power. It's more about power. I try to explain it. It's like doing lots of leg presses. It's about contacting the pedals and driving through the pedals, and it's like doing a leg press,
Mm,
you know, but 100 times a minute.
yeah. And single leg as well. It's not like both legs at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a greater power development there or requirement, and you can see that in cyclists' legs. The quad development's
Yeah.
quite great. Um, Runners, on the other hand, it's more about quick contact time and being able to hit the floor quickly and returning. Um, so those are the kind of, if in my mind, those are the key differences. And if you talk about in a very very raw way, you know, short contact, big contact.
Yeah.
Um, in reality, the actual kind of cadence levels or the strides per minute are very, very similar. So we talk about this 180 strides per minute for running as a as a general, if you're running pretty quickly, you'd be about 108 strides per minute. Obviously, if you're shorter athlete and maybe your ability to stride out might not be too great, for whatever reasons, then you might have a higher cadence. If we're doing short intervals, then naturally the cadence will go up. But it'd be somewhere between 180 to 200, maybe. And again, cycling is like 92 to 100 RPM. So again, it matches
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the actual turnover is very, very similar in that sense. Um, I think running, there's there's potentially greater drop off in form over time, and I think that is because it's short. It's just purely continual. So if we go for a 5K run, how long can we maintain that form for? We can probably maintain it quite well. You build that up to 10K, things start going a little bit, yeah,
Skew if
a little bit skew with.
yeah.
And similarly with marathon distances, things break down. Difference with cycling is you can freewheel.
Yeah.
So it could be power up. You hold the speed. You're going downhill. You're not pedaling. So the power is a bit more up and down with cycling, unless you were doing like a time trial. So the raw power delivery is different. If you're doing a 5K, it's more about threshold.
Yeah.
It's like a continual effort.
How long
Right,
can you hang on for?
yeah,
Yeah.
and you ride in that wave pretty much. If you
Yeah.
were doing a cycling time trial for again, you're doing that. But if you're doing bunch racing, it's not about that. It's high power spikes, and the way a road race formulates, it's dictated by the person at the front. Okay, so say if I was on the front and I suddenly put down a load of watts and push the speed up to 30, 35 mile an hour, the group generally would respond to that. So they're suddenly going up to 800, 1,000 watts to stay together. So the power will go up, then it'll drop off. Freewheel, power up, drop off. So every rider in that bunch would need to develop that kind of power just to stay within the race, because if you're not within that bunch of riders and you move out, you're not going to get back in, because the power requirement to get back in would be more than 1,000 watts.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So as a cyclist, and if you're looking at bunch racing or criterium racing, which is a shortened version of, you would need to train a lot of VO2 work, a lot of anaerobic work as a prerequisite in order to finish a race. So potentially your training elements would look different. If you enter a 5K race or a 10K race or road running, whether you come first or last, you're going to finish the race.
Yeah.
In a bunch race, if you don't stay within that group, if you don't have the power requirements to stay in that group or the main bunch, because there might be a breakaway going away, that's your race over.
Yeah. That's crazy, man. I remember when I was chatting to Hayden, he was talking about that exact thing with the cycling, and that if you're in the chase group and no one really has the desire to catch the front group, he said it's like almost impossible for you to go out by yourself from the chase group to catch up to the lead group. Obviously, depending on how far apart they are.
Yeah.
But it's like you were saying, I don't know, the percentage different on like what your output would have to be by yourself with, I guess it's the air resistance again, right?
Absolutely,
Like the
yeah, yeah.
headwind to catch up to that front group. He said like that's almost your race can be done then if no one else wants to try and come with you to catch them up. And what you're getting at there with I suppose like the undulating in power, we recently, me and Chloe, we got into trail running a bit this year as well. And it
Brilliant.
kind of reminds me of that, like going for a road run, like a 10K road run feels so much more fatiguing than a 10K trail run. And I guess that's because we're going to like the Peak District and stuff. So we're not running the uphills. We're usually like power walking the uphills and then running the flats and downhills. And like one time we went for like a 20K trail run, and I was a bit fatigued afterwards. But like I don't know if I could do, like if I went 20K on the road right now, I feel like I'd be destroyed afterwards. And I think is similar to that idea with the cycling, right? Where it's the undulating in power
Mhm.
versus, I don't know, there's something about the road. I think it's just so unforgiving. Like just like the flat pavement where if, like you were saying with your technique breakdown, after 5K, 10K, it's like a exponential breakdown. Would you say that's kind of a similar way of comparing it?
Yeah, I think with trail running or running up and down hills, you've got different things. Obviously, it should still be controlled.
Mm.
Obviously, because you're not going to be you're not going to be sprinting up a hill
Yeah.
to be walking back down. You're still going to be all right. You might power up and you might power over and then kind of go with your momentum. But I think probably the big thing with trail running, there's lots of other stuff going on, and
Yeah.
you're looking at foot placement. But also you've got your change of incline. So some of the worst races I find are the super flat ones, because your mechanics are the same
Mm.
throughout. And probably an issue with cycling actually, but um, the mechanics change if you go uphill and downhill. So your hips are going to be opening up a little bit more, or um, your position of your arms are going to be different as you're balancing. So that change of body position will feel easier, just because you're releasing a bit of tension more so than
Yeah, yeah,
anything.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, long stuff on the road can be quite arduous,
Yeah.
and it's a psychological thing more than anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, when I've been going for my runs lately, I don't listen to music, but I might listen to like a podcast or an audio book or something, and I find that that helps a bit. Sometimes you don't want to listen to anything, but I find that at least that makes it a little bit more entertaining. I don't know. Now that it's been raining, we haven't really been going for trail runs because you're up in the peaks of the lakes and it's all boggy and it's not very fun. Maybe talking a bit more to beginners now. Obviously, you've got a lot of experience with the elite stuff, so I wanted to talk about that. But maybe people who are listening who are beginners, what would you say are some of the and maybe we make it running specific. Obviously, there's the cycling and running, so maybe we could do cycling too. But when it comes to getting into running as a beginner, what would you say are some of the most common mistakes that people make when they first get into something like running?
Entering a marathon.
That's a mistake.
Well,
Or just like doing too much, or like the goal's too big, or like,
yeah, I think, and it's not to knock marathons at all, because it's good to have goals and good to work towards things, but start small, build up to it. I think from a social media perspective now, there's this constant drive to do bigger and bigger
oh
things
yeah,
and more crazy things, and it's my question is, why? You know,
mm,
um, if it's going to affect your health,
yeah,
that's not a good thing.
yeah. And who are you doing it for too? Like, are you just doing it for Strava or for Instagram, or like, is it actually something that you want to complete?
Yeah, I mean, it's great that it's a tick box, but start small. So the main thing is, just get doing it. Go out and run a little bit. Hopefully, you're doing it because you want to enjoy it, or you see it as a challenge. There's lots of great things out there. So park run is just a fantastic, an absolutely brilliant thing. To have that as a weekly network, from absolute beginners to seasoned runners, I'm pretty sure everyone loves it. In the running community, it's just fantastic. So, I would say, you know, join a local running club. It's really on the up now, running. And there's a great sense of community, I think, with the running side of things. So I think that's a key thing. Set small goals. If you have got a long goal, maybe speak to a coach or someone who's been there and done it before, and just like say, is this a realistic goal in a realistic time frame? Because ideally, we want to be enjoying the experience. Um, Even doing a 10K is quite, if you want to do it fairly well, it's quite a big outing. We probably want to be running at least 3 times a week. Whereas if you're wanting to do a marathon, it's a massive amount of mileage and a massive amount of commitment. So just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. But main thing is enjoy it. Get some enjoyment out of it, and don't think it's not unachievable, because it is. Everything's achievable given enough time.
Yeah, that is such an important one, and that's not even down to the the fitness or the technicality or anything. It's like at the core of the motivation. Why is it that you're actually wanting to do it? Because that's what's going to get you up, right? Like if it's a deep like desire to want to do it, I feel like you're way more likely to actually stick to the plan and
Yeah.
complete it. Yeah. And what about cycling? I don't know hardly anything at all about cycling. So say, yeah, maybe a similar question actually. Like getting into cycling, what are some of the most common mistakes you see beginners make?
Getting hung up on too much kit, I think. And this is running as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. With cycling, man, that's like endless.
it is, yeah. And there's loads and loads of really, really cheap, relatively cheap, in today's world, very cheap, good bikes out there. So I think the thing is not to get too hung up on it. Again, get out and seek a local group, but just get out a bike and go and ride. It's a brilliant way to be sociable. There's lots of different groups. Women's cycling's taken off, and that's great to see. Whether you're wanting to compete or not. The cycle networks are getting better generally. All right, some of the roads aren't particularly good, but yeah, I think there's lots of opportunity out there. But don't get too hung up on the tech side of things. As long as as long as it starts, stops, and goes, don't worry
It's a
about
pretty
it.
good place to start.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I'd be interested to know what it looks like training for both of these disciplines outside of just the discipline itself. You sort of alluded to it a while ago where cyclists are more, um, I don't know, they know, or they include more things like weight training, that's been more in that realm for a longer period of time. So outside of actually the cycling and the running, what are really important things to include to complement those disciplines? Things like weight training or stretching. Like, what does that look like?
Oh, so to complement the actual raw skill,
Discipline.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, well, hopefully nowadays, I think people see it holistically now. So yeah, the S&C side is very important, really. I think anatomically, we need to look at ourselves as as an anatomical being. And actually running in itself, because we're upright, is quite a good thing.
yeah,
Um, Cycling, for example, we are sat down in this position all the time, so we get tight hip flexors, tight shoulders, tight backs. So we're in this kind of position, and even now we're stuck in this position where everything's tightening up: cars, phones,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
computers. So this position isn't good for us, and as you get older, it becomes more
Worse and
noticeable.
worse. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, yeah. So I think that element of prehabilitation also for your sport, okay, evening things out, but also prehabilitation for our day-to-day living is quite important. Um, and I think it mainly comes from the fact is once we start increasing our training load, things start tightening up. And I do notice this, and I have noticed this when I had a little bit of an office job. I'd go and train during a dinner time, and your muscles are full of blood. All right, do a little bit of a stretch, but then you go get sat down in this position, and you might be sat here for a couple of hours, and things start locking up.
Yeah,
Your
yeah,
back starts getting tight, your hips, you start going, all right,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so I think that is one of the key things that athletes and people need to work on a day-to-day perspective. Um, there's been a greater increase in people's mobility and flexibility, and I think there's lots of things, there's loads of great information out on the internet, about mobility. And it's probably come from the high rocks element and CrossFit and, more people lifting, girls lifting, guys lifting, not necessarily powerlifting, but there is, people deadlifting and squatting, you wouldn't have seen that 10 or 20 years ago. But then you see people in the gym doing, lots of mobility before they squat. So the information's out there, and I think it's all coming together. So
Yeah,
that strength side is really, really important, and whether people are doing it in the off season. And I think from a competitive aspect, people need to switch off.
yeah,
Um, so this is not necessarily for beginners, but if you do like a full season of racing and you get to the end, you're mentally you are you've had enough. You've
Mhm.
had enough high level stuff. So it's like, okay, you might go away on holiday for 2 weeks, but then you need to get back on the bike. So it's like, well, is it just long miles? Because that is the old, that is the old thought process. So we'll just go and ride your bike 20 hours a week in the rain in winter, chatting, doing cafe rides,
Yeah,
zone two stuff, but not that you can always do zone two stuff.
yeah.
Um, but people have got more time crunch. So it'd be the case of, all right, well, what else can I do instead? Well, let's do some S&C. Let's keep that top end.
Mm.
Zwift talked about Zwift,
Yeah, yeah,
let's
yeah.
stay dry.
Yeah.
Let's manage injury risk from falling, etc.
Mm.
Um, so I think it's a big thing to build into people's training, not only from a performance perspective, but also from a mental perspective.
Mhm.
I've actually this is my change in my program where I'm focusing on different things just so I can stay fresh and focused for the rest of the
Mm.
rest of the year.
And I suppose the element there is people knowing that it's okay, and the idea of the like crossover effect or the interference effect isn't actually as a big of a thing as maybe what was thought like 10, 15 years ago is when I was getting into the gym, and it was like, if you're weight training, like, no, you can't run as well. Like, you'll lose all your muscle if you go running too. And now it's completely flipped, where like a lot of people say running actually helps with hypertrophy because of the circulation, all that kind of stuff. So it's almost like a mentality shift. So it's like, it sounds like it's a bit of a education piece where it's
Mm.
knowing that it's okay, and it's actually probably more beneficial than not beneficial to be doing other kind of modalities as well as your main discipline.
Yeah, and the thing is to look at it as longevity.
Mm.
There's more and more research coming out all the time, and sometimes you need to question the research from a sports science perspective,
Yeah.
because what works for one doesn't always work for another. But
Mm.
key things are, as we get older in life, that we need to maintain lean muscle mass. We need to maintain strength. We need to maintain flexibility, mobility, um, and you know if we can build that into our sporting environment, then that's great. That's
Mm.
great. I think sometimes with the weight side of things, we do need to be careful if we're doing a progressive plan where we are getting stronger and stronger,
Yeah.
and it starts affecting our priority A performance
Yeah.
goals. Um, the way I would look at it, and maybe this is just me, but I potentially find with the taller guys, squatting, you know, I could be out for 3 or 4 days from doing not massively heavy squats, but then 3 or 4 days affecting my priority A training.
Yeah.
Is that actually benefiting it?
Yeah.
So can I do something else? Do we do leg extension and leg curl? And I actually
Mm.
find for me that works better,
Yeah.
so I still maintain elements of strength, also not necessarily in the same muscles, but I can still do my quality training
Mm.
on my core sport. Um, so yeah, it's important, and again, goes back to the old adage: a stronger athlete is a better athlete.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember where I heard it. It must have been a podcast, but basically what they were saying is that strength is never like a disadvantage. I think that the way they phrased that just made so much sense. Obviously, maybe if you're packing on heaps of muscle, that might become a disadvantage because of the weight to power ratio, whatever you want to call it. But being stronger is never a disadvantage. Is that? It sounds like that's kind of what you're getting at there as well, right?
Yeah, and I think from a cycling perspective, I mean, I looked at some of the research a few years ago, and in many aspects, the kind of key thing with weight training, improved torque.
Hmm.
So initial power down, which is usable
Yeah.
in different areas, but not massively. It's not necessarily increasing functional threshold power or VO2 max, but it was still doing something. But I think it's the development of the robustness of the system. So if you
Mm.
do crash, if you've got stronger ligaments, stronger tendons, muscles,
Mm.
if your leg is suddenly getting twisted, is it gonna
Like
maintain?
withstand the force or whatever it is. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that is one of the things.
Yeah.
And again, longevity. I think as a young athlete, we do things and we're just fully focused on that, but we don't think about, are you going to be competing when you're 48?
Mm,
Do you have plans of competing when you're 50,
yeah,
60? So I think that is important. But there is greater crossover, I think, with the S&C stuff for more power based sports.
yeah, yeah. What do you think? Maybe we've already kind of touched on a lot of them, but what do you think are the main things that have allowed you to compete for so long? It must be, how long have you been cycling now? It must be, what, 20 years? Because you said it was in your late 20s you got into it?
Yeah, I'm trying to do my maths.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Probably coming up to 20 years now. I mean, I started. I mean, I played football all my life, and then kind of stopped pretty much when I finished uni. So that was like 2000, and then went into like fitness. Where I was doing fitness classes, so spinning, box exercise, circuit training. Did a
Mm,
little bit of running there, not a massive amount. Um, and then I had a bit more time,
mhm,
so I wanted to focus on a sport that was, I don't know, yeah. I think it was Lance Armstrong that
yeah,
really uh, got me to buy into cycling, just
mhm,
like the level of commitment and what was happening at the time. And I think it's keeping you training fresh. And I always ask myself this. I did have a year of not fully focusing on competing, and not that I fully focus every year, but I had a thought. No, I question myself. Why am I doing this year in year out? Why am I in December booking in for races or planning for the year ahead, or right, I'm going to do this, this, and this? Because what does it matter?
mm,
What does it matter if I run a 5K in 17 minutes? What does it matter if I win a race?
mm,
You know, does it matter?
yeah,
Who actually cares?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I questioned that one year, and I didn't particularly race because of it. I still keep fit and still did a bit, but it wasn't like, okay, that's a big focus. But then the question is, well, what else are you going to do? What's the alternative?
yeah,
You're going to sit around and do a bit, or
yeah.
are you actually going to crack on and do something?
What did you learn about yourself in that year?
Um, that it's probably going to be something that I'm going to be doing until I can no
Yeah,
longer do it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Whatever it might be.
Mm,
I think you don't need to do as much, or if you, it's the sacrifices you're willing to make. I think,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
I think as an athlete, we go through processing, especially if you've got an addictive personality, it can become all or nothing,
mm,
and that becomes the sole focus. And sometimes you forget about the other stuff which is important. And as a coach, I try to instill that in all my athletes,
mm,
friends, family, and relationships that, that you need to hold on to that because um, they're there when you're crossing the finish line. They're there when you're getting back from a ride and you're soaked and
yeah,
you're hungry. And they're the ones who are running bath for you and
yeah,
making you a piece of toast with,
yeah,
and that's the 10%, and if you don't have those structures there, you're 10% down in performance already.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I did learn quite a bit from that year, but I
mm,
think the main thing is, well, you know, this is you. You have to
yeah,
accept that is, we're all individual people, so, but I see that with a lot of my clients coming, I can see, right, okay, you've got the bug. You've,
mm,
and it goes from sport to business, or it's just certain personalities, I think, more so
yeah.
than anything.
I think I've only competed. I've only competed in a few different things, but one thing I've really enjoyed about competing in whatever it is that it makes the decisions so easy. I think sometimes you can have decision fatigue because there's so many different things you can do. But if you've got a marathon, whatever it is, on the 7th of September, like it really lays out at least the 12 or 16 weeks before that for you on what you need to do. Like, oh, should I go for a run today? Well, yeah, you have to because you have to run 5 days a week. Or, well, should we go, I don't know, on holiday or go do this? Like, it makes decisions a lot easier when you've got something clear to focus on. And I suppose that's mostly a good thing, but I don't know if maybe sometimes it might be a bad thing too, because maybe doesn't allow you to open your eyes up. But the framework is there, right? Like having the
Mm.
ability to focus on that and say no to other things. Maybe that's what it makes it easy to do is to say no to other things because it's clear what the focus is for at least that 3 months or whatever it is leading up to that event.
definitely, humans, I think, thrive on routine or
Mm,
structure. So
absolutely, yeah.
if it gives you that structure,
Yeah,
and like I say, I think from a decision perspective, we're kind of bombarded with
mm,
um, what we should be doing
yeah,
or the way the world is guiding us towards. We should,
yeah,
okay, you should be, you should be running here. You should,
yeah. I should do high rocks
you
now.
should,
That's the
yeah,
new thing. I should get into cycling. I should.
yeah. You should be going to the cinema tonight. You should
Yeah,
be
yeah,
going
yeah.
out with your partner for a lovely meal.
Yeah.
You
Should I
should,
start a business? Should I? Like there's so many things you can do.
yeah. So I think you're absolutely
Yeah.
right. It gives you that kind of, actually, I've got to focus. This is my goal.
Mm,
And it does boil down to, a jack of all trades. It's
mm,
like, actually, do you want to become more masterful at one thing? Um, because once you've done that, then even if you move on from it, you can go back to it.
mm.
And I think that's a key thing, isn't it? It's like, once you've done something, A, it's achievable, and B, you know how to do it.
Yeah. You have the
And
data to support that you can do it.
yeah.
Yeah. How would you describe the feeling of achieving a big goal that you've set? Like maybe to make it tangible, what's
Okay.
one of the bigger goals that you've set that you've achieved and how did that feel?
Ooh. I think what would it have been? Different ones really, but
Mm.
I think my cycling, in particular, in like national championships. It wasn't necessarily last year, even though we won national Masters Crit Champs last year. It was, in fact, I can't remember what year. It might have been 2016 or something. But, as I mentioned earlier, there's two governing bodies, three governing bodies, but two governing bodies mainly, which is British Cycling, which is probably the main governing body for cycling in the UK, and then there's TLI, which is more age related. Um, and again, I'd been working up to the national championships, um, all season, you know, 9, 10 months building up to this. Anyway, did the race, British cycling race. Um, I felt the best I've ever felt on a bike. Absolutely flying. There was a group up the road, probably about a minute and a half up the road,
Mhm.
and I managed to get in a counter move with another guy. Anyway, it was quite a bumpy circuit, and I'm not a small guy. I'm definitely not a small guy now. But even as a 72 to 75 kilogram rider, I would still be a big guy
Really? Wow. Mm.
within the cycling world. Um, and I was with a Scottish guy actually. I'd raced with him a few times before. Anyway, managed to work together and bridge over to a group of 8 who were
Mhm.
about a minute and a half away, which was like, wow, that is
It's
that is
impressive.
that is some going.
Yeah.
Anyway, we managed to keep the group going in the front. So normally, what happens is sometimes the group doesn't necessarily it doesn't necessarily work together,
Yeah.
and the bunch behind would have caught us, and these guys would have been fresh.
Mm.
Anyway, we managed to keep it away and um, kicked up this hill, and I knew this guy was good, so I followed him, got up to the end, and he pipped me by about 5 meters.
There's a finish line like right at the top.
It flattened off,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and I was like, "Oh man, like 5 meters away," and
Mm.
that was the closest I came to the road race.
Yeah.
On the same day, though, I'd gone up with a teammate, and he won his category. He won it,
Mm.
so he was a year above. So it was quite nice. So got a first and a second, and then I think 2 or 3 weeks later, obviously I had really really good form, and then went and did the TLI one. And then basically had the form to just kind of pretty much take it apart. So
Mhm.
again, came to the end, uphill sprint, and I'd already worked out prior to lap by lap because I'll normally know where I can execute a sprint,
Yeah.
and I thought that's my point, and I caught it and took the win. So it was quite nice. I mean, I was very very happy with getting a second, a podium at the British Cycling one, and ideally that would have been what I wanted, but
Yeah.
to follow it up with a first a few weeks later was like, okay, that's really good. And not years of disappointment or things not panning out, crashes, or
Mm.
it was good. And I think my little girl was born
Oh, that's so
around about
cool.
that time as well. So
Yeah,
it was,
yeah, yeah.
it was a great year.
Yeah. How would you describe that feeling of it sounds like it encompasses such a large amount of work And it's obviously, like you said, it's not just about the result, it's about the process as well. But how would you describe that feeling of like stepping on that podium? Is it like validating? Are you just really happy? Like, how would you describe how you feel when you win something like that?
Giddy. I think giddy.
Yeah.
I remember my first win, and you kind of there's different wins.
Mm.
I think there's sometimes you question your win,
Yeah.
and especially with bike racing because there's so much happening. Sometimes you think you're going to win and you get robbed on the line,
Hmm.
and there's some. I mean, the Nationals last year, I basically rode off with 2 laps to go and no one chased me, and it was kind of
All
like,
right.
okay, that was unusual.
What's going on here? Yeah.
So yeah, no, each result has a different feeling.
Mm.
Your first one's brilliant, it's just fantastic, and I think the ones that you work hard towards, and there's been a lot of sacrifice. And sometimes it's very anticlimactic because it's kind of
Mm.
like, what now?
Yeah.
Um, I think my biggest victories, or not my biggest victories, but actually other people's victories within friends. So good friend of mine, Andy, won Northwest Regional Championships one year, and he's just a good guy, and everyone likes him. And he won that, and the feeling you have of someone else winning was like, it's just
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I've felt that numerous times, and James Gullen actually, who's a good guy. He was riding for Rafa, and he's won. Did he win the Tour of Ireland? He's won the RAS, and I
Hmm.
think he was third on the British Time Trial
Oh,
Championship. So I think
wow.
he was behind Alex Dowsett, and I can't remember who else it was, but he came third. So he's a working guy. He's a 9 to 5er. But I remember as we were just a shop squad
Hmm.
based out of Preston, and there was a load of domestic professional teams in like a local stage race. But we won that as a team. But he was a
Yeah.
young lad. I think it's about 18 or 19, but we
Wow.
took all these decent, like big teams on, and
Yeah.
this 18, 19-year-old lad won the stage race, and those successes I remember more than anything because it's like one of my best friends has just done this,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
it's great, so.
Yeah. Yeah. The feeling of watching someone really close to you compete is it's really, and I don't know quite how to describe it too, but it's so much different to when you compete because whether or not you win or lose, I guess it's all down to you and you handle it in a different way because it's you. But like my partner Chloe, who I've mentioned a couple times, she is a IFBB like professional bikini bodybuilding athlete,
Okay,
and
wow.
she hasn't competed in a few years, but I've watched her compete. I don't know, maybe 8 times or something, and like it's such a different feeling watching someone who you care about compete, whether they're racing or up on stage or something, versus like you doing the thing. Maybe it's because like you feel like less in control. I don't know. Or maybe it's like almost a sense of worry for them as well when they're doing the thing because you just want them to do well. I don't know. It's a different feeling, right? To you doing the thing.
Yeah, I think it's the emotion, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You can you know you you can feel the story, and you
Mm,
you can sense what they've been through,
mm,
and even though you've not done it, it's different when you're doing it yourself. But
yeah,
and you see the trials and the tribulations that
yeah.
they go through, and
All the context, right? It's not just
yeah.
that day. It's like the lead up to that event.
So you share that as as a partner or as
Mm,
a friend. You see what happens. So it's how that story unveils. And,
mm,
we all um, love sport for that. It's the story, isn't it? It's
yeah,
not just the fact of someone's won this.
yeah,
It's a great thing,
yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. One thing I'd like to pick your brain on before we wrap up. I was listening to a Huberman podcast recently, and he was talking about how do I want to phrase it exactly? I'll just say what he was talking about and then
Yeah.
figure it out. But he was basically saying that experiencing dopamine without hard work preceding it is something that can be very, I don't know if I want to say like dangerous or that's a thing that can be quite a negative thing in our life. So if you,
Hmm.
I don't know, any addictions almost like fill that, where you're getting a big dopamine hit without having to do hard work before it. And then I see something like endurance training being the exact opposite to that. You get the dopamine after you've done been on the bike for 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever it is. So could you speak to that element in your life when it relates to positive emotion and doing an
Mm.
endurance sport?
Yeah, I think that is. I think yeah, endurance addicts are based around that. You know,
Mm,
it's all about the endorphin release and um, you know, a positive experience afterwards. And I think that's what your exercise junkie goes for. You
mm,
know, your typical gym goer. I'm not necessarily talking about your weights guys now because I think they have a different goal. You
mm,
know, but you can see that more in your hit training now, and
yeah,
again, your people doing high rocks. But it's interesting, you know, that this kind of dopamine instant gratification thing is coming now.
mm,
And I think as humans, we're more aware of it than ever, and
yeah,
you know, are more aware of it of children growing up, and
iPads and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
yeah, and even the kids programs now, it's very very overstimulating.
yeah,
So they are getting this, and if we've been talked about this, so it's like, but is that creating healthy people? So if we are, I love the buzz of endurance exercise, and I love that feeling. But are these other means actually beneficial for us, or are these things actually creating depression and
mm.
desire?
Addiction and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So then you have to self-assess that, and you know, I coach different clients on different things, not just sporting endeavors. Some of it's just general health and kind of well-being, and I get people to self-score on those kind of things. And again, it's very very subjective, because if you're putting in some interventions on, say, high intensity training, someone's coming in and they're slightly depressed, or their energy levels are low, or they're not feeling good about themselves, it's like, okay, well, this week self-score yourself, do what you're doing.
mm,
Okay, well, I like the glass of wine at night. Okay, well, that's fine. But self-score yourself every morning where you are at on these scales. Okay, twos, threes, fours, fives. Okay, I'll give you a week's worth of interventions. Go and do this. Da-da. Okay, so no iPhone before after 7 o'clock at night.
yeah,
Make sure you eat these things. Um, say some positive things in the morning.
mm,
Look back and be grateful for what you've done, and then go and do some hit training 3 times a week. Now self-score yourself. Okay, 6, 7. Da-da. All right.
yeah,
Week 1, week 2, what do you want to be?
mm,
Week 2, okay. So I have not told you that. You've told yourself that. So
yeah,
so you make those choices. But yeah, I think there is a big thing, on that reward element as well, isn't there? Is if you are doing exercise, if you are doing hard work, and even if you do, irrelevant of exercise, we see you getting the endorphin kicks afterwards.
mm,
If you go and doing hard work, if you're going to do a hard day in the office or something like that, or whatever, bricklaying,
yeah,
hard work and then reward. That makes sense.
yeah.
It's not. People aren't necessarily jealous, are they, about uh, the journey up to it? Jealous about that
The gold
reward.
star.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But it's actually the journey which gives us the most joy.
yeah,
Because it gives us the hardship, but it also
yeah.
gives us the highs.
Yeah. It's that whole idea of like you experience positive emotion when you see yourself working towards a meaningful goal. And I think that is so true. And you could copy paste that across anything, but like an event like a race is so obvious. If you see yourself complete a hard session towards this goal that maybe you thought was going to be too hard, or but then you managed to achieve it, like wow, that's positive emotion. And that you could, like I said, copy paste that to anything. But if you're not, at least I think, if you're not working towards something meaningful, like seeking positive emotion it can be a lot more difficult to get positive emotion, and you probably are more likely to get it out of more fleeting ways, like you're scrolling your phone or you're watching screens or you're gaming or something, because it still gives you that sort of
Mhm,
that positive emotion or that dopamine, but it doesn't have that hard work that comes before it, which I think is the bit of a trap. And it's so much easier to take that route too. I
mhm,
think like I used to be half decent at running, like back at school. I'd come in like the top 5 at cross country, and then got into weight training, did some bodybuilding shows. I thought, I can't run, I'm going to lose all my muscle. And then the past couple of years since we moved to the UK, I've gotten back into it, and it's been such an interesting journey getting back into that and working towards something meaningful that's also difficult. And maybe it was also, it's even been more difficult because I used to be kind of good at it, and then I
Mhm.
wasn't very good at it when I came back into it. But having that, like seeing myself slowly improve at that and have something to get up for, and I did a 10K race last year, and it's just really cemented to me. And I was a personal trainer, so I've done that stuff and seen it with clients. But to be a beginner again
Mhm.
and to do that and something that's difficult and work towards something meaningful, it's like cemented to me, like anecdotally, that that's where you get your positive emotion from. And it's not to say you shouldn't engage in scrolling and TV. That stuff is fine, but not all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm just a big believer in, like, why not try set a meaningful goal and just like give it a crack and see how you feel. It's like you said, the week 1 versus week 2. See how you feel working towards something versus not working towards something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. It boils down to that reflection, doesn't it?
Mm,
Because one week rolls on to the next, and to the next, and to the next.
mm,
So I think we do. We all go on phones and we've got that instant stuff, but I think sometimes we need to question: is right? Okay, right now, what value is this actually giving me?
yeah.
Is it me? Is it making me better
Yeah.
for whatever reasons?
Yeah. And that's what I was going to say about running too. On the same kind of note, one interesting thing I've like learned from running that has been such a big learning is that you don't often, you don't always feel like running. You don't often like feel like running. Sometimes you do. Maybe it's that rule of thirds thing.
Yeah.
But when you go for a run, you always feel so much better for doing it.
Hmm.
Like if you say your alarm goes off at 5 a.m. and, oh, should I go for a run? Oh, should I not? You always feel better for doing the thing. Unless obviously maybe you're sick or whatever, like that, those kind of examples. But you always feel better for doing the thing. And I think it's the case with weight training. Like I've learned that from weight training too. You might not feel like going to the gym 10, 15 minutes into your session. You're like, man, I'm so glad I did this. Like you never regret doing the session.
Hmm.
But there's something especially about running. It's almost like you have this amnesia
Mm.
about how good you can feel from doing exercise, especially in the morning, I think.
Mm.
But that's also what makes it so good, is because when you do it again, like, oh, wow, yeah, that's right. I feel good from doing this thing.
I think there's one of the big things that came out of COVID, and
Mm,
I think the element of green exercise.
hmm.
So just getting out, being in the fresh air.
Yeah,
If you've got your headphones in, great. If not, you can hear the birds in the morning, or you know, there's different stimuli going on.
yeah,
Um, and that's one of the, I think, the issues today living, isn't it? It's like, especially based in a city, you're
yeah,
not always surrounded by green spaces, so just getting out into nature, and smelling the fresh air, and I think that's a great way to start the day, because
yeah,
we're linking back
yeah.
to the way we're supposed to
It's our
be, really.
biology, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was listening to another podcast that Danny Jones was actually. It wasn't about exercise, but the guy he was talking to said like we are really losing our humanness, and it's like this city living, exactly like you say, like work here, go home to the apartment, go into the gym, don't really ever look up at the sky at night. All of those kind of like basic biology like fundamentals
hmm
is so easy to forget about when you are in a city and you're always in this artificial light and in buildings and stuff. But and Huberman, he's a massive advocate for like basic biology, like get some light in the morning, get some fresh air. Like the more you're outside, the better you're gonna sleep at night. And it's so simple, but I think it's just so easy to take the other option because it's, I don't know, you face less resistance in engaging with it, I suppose.
yeah, but it's routines, though, isn't it?
Mm,
If you build that into a routine, even you know you have a meal at night, and again, today's living, we're eating later and later.
yeah,
It's like you eat, go for a walk, let it go through your system.
yeah,
Get some fresh air. So if you're building that into your day-to-day thing, I think that thing with the running is just a great thing with running is, though, isn't it? In the morning, trainers on,
yeah.
shorts on, top on.
It's so accessible. Like there's hardly any barriers involved in that. I think the number one barrier is just yourself.
Yeah.
Should I go for a run? Just do the thing. That's what I love about having an event booked in, is like there isn't a should I go for a run. It's like, well, do you want to perform your best at the thing? Like, you just have to go for a run. Yeah. Maybe before we wrap it up, I'd be interested to know what are some upcoming goals for you this year? What have you got on the schedule,
Ooh,
whether it's racing or maybe outside of racing? Like, what are some goals for you this year?
well, I was thinking, I've been always stuck on going sub 17 on a 5K.
Yeah, you got a 17 like quite recently, didn't you?
No, 18, 18,
Was it?
18,
Yeah, yeah,
18. I'm, I'm thinking about testing. So I've got a 5K in 2 weeks,
yeah.
something like that. So it's the same course, and it is really, really good local event in Lancaster,
Hmm.
nice and flat. So I think I'm going to test myself on that, and then go along with the protocol as if I lose weight, because got a bit more body fat than what I need to at the moment, especially for an aerobic style athlete.
Yeah.
And then repeat the test in
Mm.
2 or 3 months and
What
see where I'm at.
what's going to allow you to get into the sub 17 or the 17? Like, what do you think like the added weight that you're carrying is a significant factor, or do you think there's like other things at play?
Yes, no.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, could I be training harder? Yeah, you can always train more, but you still need to be aware of the loading you're putting through yourself.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and I think it's more from a data point of view, because if you look at certain data, if you lose so many kilo, you go so much faster. And I have tested this before,
Yeah.
and it works. So it's like, oh, let's maybe just do this as a little bit of a science test,
Mm.
and it'll give me something. It'll motivate me to lose some weight,
Yeah.
um, and like I say, if I'm competing in cycling, I will be doing some bike races this year because I'll have my national champions jersey, so I'll have to kind of defend it in the races. It'd be rude not to.
Yeah.
Um, and I like that because with a group of guys and girls that I race with, just that social aspect and that flow in a bike race, and it is chess on wheels,
Hmm.
so there's lots of things going on. There's a lot of tactics going on in bike racing,
Yeah.
and it's great to see how races unfold. So we'll do a little bit of that. I've got a half marathon booked.
Oh yeah, nice.
In fact, we're doing one in Manchester, so I think
Oh yeah.
that's May.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll build up to that. Then after that, I don't know. I don't know.
Exciting.
Yeah, there's a lot to do in that
Yeah.
time frame. So those are my kind of immediate goals.
Yeah.
And if I get into my bike racing, then I might push on for nationals at the back end of the year.
Cool.
Not committing to anything yet, though. I'm
Yeah.
just
See how the first half of the year kind of plays out.
just go with a
Mm.
little bit of flow more so than anything.
Yeah.
Get to the point of priority. What's it? Enjoy it and feel good.
Hmm.
I think that's the thing.
Cool. And if people want to follow your journey, would you say like your Instagram is the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, Instagram's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
What is it? Just Steve Abbott?
Steve Abbott, performance coach.
Oh yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, put bits on there. It's predominantly my coaching. I might
Yeah.
put a little bit of personal stuff on there as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah. Cool, man. Like I said at the start, I genuinely appreciate you coming into the office. It was really good to chat to you, and you're the first like cycling specific coach I've spoken to too. So that was yeah, we spoke a lot about the cycling there, which I feel like I personally learned a lot. So appreciate you coming in, man.
Absolute pleasure. Enjoyed it.
No worries.